Has today's NBA reached the point where almost any good player can command a max contract? The Supermax was originally designed to help teams retain their homegrown stars and promote competitive balance across the league. But for small market teams, it has increasingly become a high-stakes gamble in which eligible stars can command enormous salaries, leaving teams trapped between two bad options. NBA max salaries are generally set at 25, 30, or 35% of the salary cap, depending on a player's years of service. Under the standard rules, the 35% max is reserved for players with at least 10 years of NBA service. But under the 2017 collective bargaining agreement, the league added a designated veteran provision to the max contract system. That provision allowed certain players with 7 to 9 years of service who remained with their original team or arrived through an early career trade and met specific award criteria to reach the 35% max early. Steph Curry became the first player to sign a Supermax contract under this provision. In 2017, the Warriors gave him a 5-year Supermax deal worth $201 million. Steph absolutely deserved the max. He was the homegrown superstar at the center of the Warriors' rise. He won back-to-back MVPs, and he had already brought Golden State a championship. One of the main goals of the Supermax was to give teams, especially small-market franchises, a better chance to retain the stars they developed. Teams could offer them far more money than any other franchise. For example, in 2020, the Bucks signed Giannis Antetokounmpo to a 5-year, $228 million contract. And in 2022, the Nuggets gave Nikola Jokic a 5-year deal worth roughly $270 million. Both contracts set new records in NBA history at the time. Giannis delivered in 2021, leading Milwaukee to its second championship and its first in 50 years. Jokic also took the Nuggets to a new level and led them to the first championship in franchise history in 2023. On the surface, the Supermax looks perfect. The player gets rewarded, the team keeps its core, and the franchise protects its value and stability. But people often ignore the fundamental risk that comes with a Supermax contract, because players like Steph, Giannis, and Jokic, true franchise-altering superstars who elevate everyone around them, are still the minority. Many Supermax contracts do not age well. Some even cripple a team's financial flexibility. Bradley Beal is one example. His 35% max contract eventually backed the Wizards into a corner. In 2022, Washington gave him a 5-year, $251 million max contract that also included a no-trade clause. At the time, Beal was indeed an elite scorer. He had averaged more than 30 points per game in consecutive seasons, but he was still not truly the kind of franchise player who could carry a contender on his own. The bigger the contract a team gives to one player, the harder it becomes to use the remaining payroll flexibility to build a legitimate supporting cast around him. Beal's contract consumed a massive portion of the Wizards' cap sheet. Washington had far less flexibility to add a legitimate second or third option, and once a max player gets injured or performs below expectations, it becomes extremely difficult to move his contract. That is the dilemma of handing out a top-of-the-market deal. At the time, the Wizards had only one all-star player, and that was Beal. If they did not offer him the max, Beal could leave, and the team would likely have to begin another rebuild. After signing that max contract, Beal later dealt with injuries. His production also declined, and the no-trade clause left the Wizards with very little leverage and no easy way out. Rudy Gobert is another frequently cited example of an overpay. He was a Defensive Player of the Year. He was the absolute defensive anchor of the Jazz, and he consistently averaged a double-double. But he was not the kind of two-way offensive centerpiece teams normally expect to build a championship team around. Even so, in 2020, the Jazz still signed Gobert to a 5-year extension worth $205 million, just below the full Supermax. Once the playoffs arrived, his limitations became far more pronounced. His offense depended heavily on teammates creating finishes for him around the rim. He could not create his own offense. He had no mid-range game, no three-point shot. His free throws were inconsistent, and opponents repeatedly dragged him away from the rim and forced him to defend in space. Those limitations became part of the reason Utah repeatedly fell short in the playoffs. So what happens if teams refuse to offer these players the full max? Kemba Walker is an example. In 2019, the Hornets did not offer All-Star guard Kemba Walker a full max contract, much less the Supermax for which he was eligible. Walker then left for the Celtics. What happened afterwards suggested Charlotte was right not to commit Supermax money to him, but the Hornets also failed to turn his departure into the kind of return that could jumpstart a rebuild. Their record remained near the bottom for years, and they continued to miss the playoffs. Supermax contracts put teams in a brutal bind. Either you pay a premium and bet that the player can stay healthy and keep performing at a high level, or you watch a homegrown star walk away for nothing. Not only do you risk losing ticket revenue, but you also face backlash from fans and the media. So in the end, which players do you think received max money without delivering max level impact? And which players do you think actually deserve the max but never got it?